Em, can you believe we started Interview Boss in 2021?
Not really. It's insane. That's a lot of episodes and a lot of hours of talking.
Oh my gosh, it is. And if you're scrolling through all of our episodes, you might scroll straight past something that you really, really needed.
Yes, we're always getting messages from people asking us to do an episode on something, and I'm like, we already have.
So we've put together playlists to help you find the episodes that are exactly what you need, suited to your situation.
They're all categorized. If you're applying for jobs, we have episodes about resumes, cover letters, job ads. If you've been offered your dream job, we have episodes on resigning, exit interviews, and how to impress at your new company.
And we even have a very special playlist that's very popular for if you have an interview coming up immediately and you need just our most recommended hard-hitting episodes between now and then.
For all our last-minute listeners. It's all there for you. You can browse by category and check out all the playlists at interviewboss.com.au/podcast. You're not going to tell them to just walk in and ask to speak to the CEO and just tell them that you'll work 3 weeks for free. Not happening. Not happening. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Interview Boss. My name is Emma. I'm a radio journalist who's teamed up with my sister to give you advice, inspiration and support when you're looking for a new job. Sarah is a HR and recruitment professional, and together we're excited to give you all the tips, tricks and behind the scenes knowledge to help you in your career.
Hey, Em, and welcome back, our wonderful listeners. Em, I feel like today your radio voice is like really radioing. I don't know.
It do be radioing.
You're giving newsreader.
It's the default I go into whenever I'm reading something.
Yeah, it's like a script reading.
And I was just reading off the script, so it just kicked in.
It's just your non-human voice. It's like your...
Hey, it's still human.
No, I know, but it's like your, I don't know, your alter ego.
It's my customer
kind of
service voice.
Yes. Who are we giving a shout out to? I believe this is a very special Interview Academy shout out.
It is to alumna Trish. She said, "Hi, Sarah and Em. I've never felt so prepared for a set of interviews in my life after completing Interview Academy."
Oh.
If that's not a testimonial, I don't know what is.
I know.
The course was the extra lift I needed to keep going, to push myself on the examples, to push myself to think deeper and to practice. I went over the job description with a fine-tooth comb and connected the dots between what they were looking for and my experience, coupled with a few examples. My examples were categorized into different topics that could work for multiple questions, and I didn't feel nervous because of the pre-interview breathing exercises on your podcast.
Aww.
That's where we disagree about sniffing and the timing of our breaths.
Yeah.
I soaked in all of the good information and gave it my best shot. During the interviews, I received positive phrases such as, "You really hit the nail on the head there," and "That's a great example." Leaving the interviews, I know I gave it my all and did my best. Waiting to hear back and excited and really hope it's the outcome that I dream of. Thanks so much for putting together a highly effective course that really sets anyone up for success with any interview if you're willing to put in the time, effort and practice. This course, coupled with your podcast episodes, has been a core part of my preparation, and I want to say a huge thanks for it.
Oh my God. I don't even think I read that one until I've seen this right now. That is incredible. Trish, you are amazing. And I feel like sometimes it's a bit hard for me to explain on these episodes and on our little ads, like what's different about the course than just like listening to our podcast episodes. Like obviously I spent hours and hours and hours and hours putting it all together, but then someone's like, "Oh, well, why should I do it?" And I'm like, I don't know. It's just everything in there. It's everything you could ever possibly need. And it's really nice when someone else explains.
Yes, validates it, puts it into words.
Yeah, it's very helpful because I'm like, I don't know how I can explain what it's going to do other than saying like it steps you through. But it's so much more than that because it's like every single light bulb moment that I've ever helped someone get to in a coaching session of like, oh my God, oh, I get it now. It all makes sense. it's all of that in the one place, but it's not just like explanations of stuff. They're activities too. All the little micro skills that you need to put together in order to do well at answering an interview question. There's so much that goes into that. There's like, okay, we're going to help you brainstorm. Then we're going to help you pick the right ones. Then we're structuring them. Then we're helping you practice. Then we're helping you work out how to make them better. Then the skills that a lot of people forget about. How do you match your examples to the question that they ask you? There's like a little activity that you do, like a quiz that you go back and forth with that shows you how to do that. How do you categorize your examples? Like she talks about having them listed under different topics and stuff. It's just every little tiny micro skill, step by step, that pushes you to go as deep as you can.
I'm going to stop you there. I just came up with the perfect simile.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to scrap all of our other marketing material. This is the slogan. Interview Academy is like the fuse box. Ideas and light bulbs are always flicking on and off in there. It's the mitochondria of the cell, if you will.
It's the powerhouse of the cell.
It's the powerhouse of the cell.
Oh, nobody's going to understand that.
Why? Doesn't every year 10 science teacher, all you take away from that whole year of learning is mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell?
Do you know that I think it's Hank Green on TikTok. Do you follow him? Surely you've seen some of his stuff. I think it was him or someone else, I hope I'm not misquoting, actually looked into like, where does that saying, the powerhouse of the cell, like where did that come from and why is it so universal? Because it's not like it's a funny catchphrase thing. It's like, this is science teachers telling us this stuff. And someone's like tracked it down to like the first journal article or the first book or whatever that called it that. And it's really cool.
We were like, you know what? That works.
Yeah. Somebody authored that for the first time and everyone was like, yeah, you're right. It kind of is.
Despite contrary belief, I was really good at biology.
Who's believing otherwise? I'm not believing otherwise.
Well, me a little bit.
You didn't think you could do it.
No, I was good at it. Except in year 12, when they tried to teach us about Punnett squares.
Oh, yeah.
I had a mental breakdown. The whole year. I had no idea what they were talking about. My teacher explained it to me probably 50 times until one time I was in the library with my friend Lily. Shout out to Lily. And she explained it to me. And for some holy reason that day, it clicked and I cried because I spent the whole year so fucking confused and having no idea what anyone was talking about.
And aren't they like pretty straightforward about like who gets the genes and stuff?
No, the act of actually doing them, and they'd be like, so this one turns into this because, and I'd be like, why? Wait. Like they would say the step as if it was so clear and I'm like, hang on, not connecting. Anyway, I cried and Lily went on to become a primary school teacher and she almost cried with me because she felt so good that she helped me to understand it, and she's gone on to be a teacher. So hopefully she's teaching more kids about Punnett squares.
Everybody has one of those things that was just like the thing that you just couldn't wrap your head around. And it's not necessarily the most genuinely complicated. It's just for whatever reason your brain's like, nah, can't do it. I just cannot understand this. I was so all over physics. It was my favorite subject. I'm a science girly from way back, except for some reason, the parabola formulas, like when you're like, it's like someone threw something and the ball travels up and then it's like the highest point and then it drops down again. For some reason, I just couldn't get my head around them. In the end, I decided the effort that I was going to have to put into to understand them versus how many marks it was going to be likely worth in my exam was just not worth it. So I just went, you know what? It's fine. If it's a writing out question, I'll do my best. If it's a multiple choice question, I'm going to guess it and move on. And it was a multiple choice and I guessed it and I moved on.
Nice. And you'll never know if you got it right or not.
It came down to potentially 1 mark and it was like, great, I'd never need to ever work out how to, I don't know. It just never clicked. I couldn't do it.
Pick your battles. Pick your battles.
Pick your battles, absolutely.
Anyway, massive sidestep here.
Now, if you want to check out the powerhouse of the cell, that is the Interview Academy.
The fuse box.
The fuse box that have light bulbs switching off and on, just like Trish, then check out interviewboss.com.au/coaching and you can find out all about our one-on-one sessions, our Interview Academy, find out what's right for you if you need a bit more help. And you can be interview success like Trish. Good luck, Trish. We've got our fingers crossed for you. Now, if you need some help or some advice or liked one of our episodes, slide into our DMs. But Em, what is the cardinal rule before you slide into our DMs?
You have to follow us on Instagram, or else I'll send you a bad, spooky chain email that will curse you with bad luck for 10 years unless you forward it on to 5 other people.
And like the new version of that is the TikTok sounds that you have to listen to or like forward or save or whatever.
Claim this or bad juju for 10 years.
They're the modern chain email that you have to forward. I've got so much bad juju, I never forward them. So this week's episode is not recommended or suggested or asked for by anyone else, but we thought that this was quite a unique concept. And if you're listening to this because you've had this sent to you, well then, oh my God, it worked. How cool. And P.S., sorry for the really random kind of segues. This is your introduction to Interview Boss and what it's all about. And what are we talking about today? Give us some context.
Well, you're here because you have a friend who thinks highly of you and your friend needs some help. They have an interview coming up. They've put in all the work to come up with what they're going to talk about, their strategies, but they need help to practice. Now, you've been summoned because you're charming, you're caring, you're intelligent, you're all the things, okay? So we need you to take this seriously. This is a very important role. Now, we're not going to laugh and make a joke of it. We need you to put on your serious pants and simulate a real interview environment with them.
But we can laugh while we're talking, while we're prepping you, and you can make it lighthearted in general, but this is a very serious responsibility. You know, with great power comes great responsibility. And as the practicee helper, you have a lot of responsibility because how confident this person, who is one of our wonderful, wonderful listeners, how confident they feel in their interview, well, you're going to be able to influence that a little bit. You need to gas them up. I'm telling you now.
Yes, lots of praise needed. But I think it's important that we give you some context because you're not necessarily an Interview Boss listener, but your bestie is. So they've been following our method, which means when they're preparing for an interview, we have banned them from just Googling common interview questions and then trying to come up with some answers for those vague, wishy-washy answers where they say a whole lot of nothing without giving any specifics. That's in the bin. We don't prepare like that. How we prepare is that we come up with our best bits. So our stories, our examples, our achievements, we turn them into stories so they're engaging. We take you on a little narrative like Red Riding Hood. We have you hooked on the end of your seat, and those examples show a multitude of things and they're adaptable to many different questions. So think about it like your senior exams in high school where you have your English quotes prepared ahead of time, but you don't know what the exam question's going to be, but you go in and you use your quotes and you adapt them to the question. That's what we're doing.
We know what the answers are. We just don't know what the questions are yet. That's kind of how we're thinking. We're becoming the expert on all the amazing things that we've done. And then when we go in and we get a question, we've got options for pre-prepared little stories and examples and anecdotes depending on what it is that they would like to hear about. That's how we adapt on the spot. We can respond to whatever they might come up with. And we're also making sure that we're doing ourselves justice and showing off the cool stuff about us as opposed to digging through trying to find an example of some random little thing that happened once where, yeah, we can tick that box and answer that question, but we haven't told them about all the great things that we've done. So that's the kind of general philosophy that we're going with here. If you want more info on how that works or why we do it that way, we have whole episodes on our best bits. Just ask your friend, partner, neighbour, sister, father, mother, whoever it is that you're helping to send you a link to the episodes that they've liked the most if you would like to do a bit of a deep dive. But that's a bit of a background.
But no one's doing that. This is the hot crash course. This is the hot mess crash course.
Well, I also think that maybe like both of you are listeners. I kind of love that. We have a few like Interview Boss power couples out there.
I'm kind of thinking they're roping in the clueless brother. The clueless brother's my demographic. They're like, oi, listen to this. I need your help. Upskill quickly. That's who I'm imagining is listening to this.
Or it's the roomie who's like, I work in healthcare. I don't understand this whole interview thing. Like, I've never done that.
I feel like our target audience is the clueless person. So we're giving them a hot crash course.
We are. So here's what we want you to kind of be doing. So they're going to be practicing a few different things. We've given them instructions to be practicing their career story, which is kind of their answer to the tell me about yourself, basically. And we're also getting them to practice their actual interview answers. So they're going to potentially give you some interview questions to ask them, and they're going to be actually trying to respond to those in a real way. So those are the things that we're covering. That's our content. Now, what should you be listening for when they're going through each of their answers? So we're going to start with their career story. So this is the answer to that question. So tell us a little bit about you. So why have you applied for this role? Like those general kind of intro questions that you're getting at the very beginning of an interview. What should we be listening for when we're like assessing, thinking how well it's going, all of that kind of stuff?
Well, you want it to make sense. You want it to make sense and for you to have a picture of why they're in front of you. So it needs to cover the main parts of your career story, how you've ended up here. If you've had a major career switch that maybe on paper they'd be confused, hang on, why are you applying to be an electrician when you're a nurse? You know, this part needs to give context, so it needs to make sense. Also, you need to have personality in here. This is the first question. It's the opener. It's the time to inject who you are. You know, you can make a bit of a joke. You can just show your personality, your interests. We're not being robots that are rattling off facts.
And personality doesn't mean be extroverted.
No.
Like, I think people often think that it means be extroverted. If you're passionate about something, let that come through a little bit. Like if you're a little bit nerdy about data or you really like a certain thing or like whatever it is, let that come through a little bit. Like we don't want you to be sounding robotic and like super professional and using all these words you wouldn't normally. You want to sound like yourself, like authentic is what we're going for.
And also, you can include in here any little anecdotes. So if you're applying because you had a friend that worked at the company and that's how you heard about it and you heard great things, or if you've always wanted to work there, that's been your goal, or any little anecdotes about the company, what stands out to you about them. And also, it's okay for this to be long. A lot of times our listener, your buddy, worries that they're rambling too much. You're allowed to take a good 3, 4, 5 minutes to explain this, especially if we're going through most of our career and what led us here. That takes time.
Most people's will be like 2 to 3 minutes, but it's okay for it to be longer, particularly if you've got justification for why it's longer, because you've got a long career, or you've done a lot of stuff, or it's a senior role or whatever. You should be taking up that time. If they're doing a 30, 40-second answer, they're just not covering enough detail, right? And they're leaving all that opportunity go to waste, and they could be filling it with awesome stuff. Now, important to talk about what this shouldn't sound like. Now, this is a bit of a disclaimer for just the whole rest of this episode, actually. You, dear person who has been roped in to help them, probably have your own thoughts about what you've done in interviews before, or what you've heard, or what someone's told you, or what you saw that TikTok person say about you should say this or you should say this. We love the enthusiasm and the ideas, and we know you want to share them, but I want you to maybe not send them on a whole nother rabbit hole of giving them advice that contradicts what we've been saying.
If there's boomer parents that are listening to this, if your young Gen Z child has asked you to listen to this, you're not going to tell them to just walk in and ask to speak to the CEO and just tell them that you'll work 3 weeks for free. Not happening. Not happening.
And these ideas of like, I've had people in coaching sessions be completely all twisted up. We have this whole section of like why you have to talk about why you're actually there. And they've twisted themselves up because they can't explain why they're actually there, because they can't talk about why they're leaving their job because their partner told them that they definitely can't say a single bad thing about their current workplace, which is just a myth that we've busted on this podcast before. So you're going to sound so confident, and they probably love you and trust you, and they're going to be really tempted to listen to whatever you say. And it might scramble them because then they won't know how to do that in the context of what we've already been teaching them. And just be really cautious.
You're just listening to our advice, the framework we've given you, and you're judging them on that. No external opinions.
That's right. And if we've told you to think about something, great. If you know specific insider information in their industry that's very particular, more than what we would know for context, great. Feel free to use it and pass it on. If it's fairly generic and it's your opinion, consider whether you want to share it or not. That's all we're going to say.
And you can give feedback as in like, oh, you got a bit untangled there, or a bit rambly, or you went a bit nervous and I can tell you're speeding up. Like all of that, yes, we love that. But we're not trying to send them off track with varying career advice.
Like strategy stuff is not what we're going to do of like, oh, you shouldn't say that or you should include that or whatever, of things that contradict the advice that we're giving. But your subjective opinion for sure, because actually it's going to work so well. If you have never heard these stories before and you're hearing them for the first time, it's going to be really helpful because the person who's practicing this has been in the weeds practicing these stories and coming up with them, and they need someone to hear it for the first time and react to it like, okay, what impression does that get? I actually kind of think the less you know about the person's career that you're listening to, kind of the better, actually.
Go pick up a stranger off the street and ask them to do this. Don't. That's unsafe.
The other thing about your career story, really, 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 really important. This is probably the main thing that I find that people don't do when they come to me in coaching sessions. They need a strong finish. Even if the person asks them, tell me about your career, tell us a little bit about yourself, it should always finish with why they're here and why they want this specific role. Always. Even if it's not specifically asked for, you need a strong finish. And it should feel like, oh, it all makes sense at the end. So that's what we're looking for. You can pause here if you need to go and listen to their career story, if you need to re-listen back to this.
Interview Academy might be the perfect thing you're looking for. Interview Academy is a course Sarah has been working on after delivering hundreds of interview coaching sessions and getting incredible results.
But unfortunately, I'm only one gal living in an Aussie time zone who works a day job, and all of that mean I can't help everyone one-on-one, which drove me crazy.
So for over a year, Sarah's been working on turning all of those amazing lessons into an on-demand, step-by-step interview prep course. We hold your hand through the entire thing,
and you can do it at home in your own time and get instant access right now. Check it out at interviewboss.com.au/interview-academy. The link is in the show notes. Now, next, what are we listening to?
So we're going to be listening to their interview answers. So they're going to be reading us the stories. You're going to be asking them questions. They're going to practice. Now, when they're giving their examples and stories, we're going to tell you about the structure. So we have a little golden rule that it should cover the situation. So they give the context, what was happening, set the story, set the scene. Next is what I did. So what I did as a result of whatever problem or situation was going on.
Specific, the details, breaking it down. Here's all the things that I did. Here's how I was involved. Here's what the team did. Here's what someone else did. How did it happen? What was their involvement? What was their thought process sometimes is important because like that's showing some skills of the reason why they did that.
And then the end result, which is obviously very important because, okay, so what? You did all that. Who cares? Well, in the end, I was able to maintain a customer satisfaction rate that was high.
Or the end result is we're 3/4 of the way through the project and it's looking really good. Or the end result is we're working well together as a team. It doesn't always have to be game-changing or life-saving or like something, bomb drop or whatever. It can be, and now next time we have a process to follow because we've worked it all out this time. Like it doesn't have to be changing the world. It's just a summary of like where did it all end up.
And what was the impact of the good thing that you did?
Yes. Yeah. You should be kind of revisiting some of the situation stuff. I find that as soon as someone's prompted, they understand the result part really well. The what I did, sometimes they don't go into enough detail. And so they're saying things like, so I liaised with the stakeholders, and you're like, what the fuck does that mean? What do you mean? Like, did you meet with them? Like, did you email them? What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? They're glossing over it because in their head, they know exactly what they're talking about.
Yes. And you do your job every single day. It's second nature.
But the biggest thing, situation, people don't set the scene well enough. They don't cover enough context. And so all of the incredible work they did and the result doesn't sound impressive because they've forgotten to give the context and they've forgotten to mention that the deadline was actually normally 3 months and this time they were doing it in a week. They've just said, and we had a week to do it. And because you didn't have the context that it normally takes 3 months, you're like, okay, sure, a week. Yeah, sure. Sounds fine.
Yes. Let me give you a little example.
Oh, okay, Em, I know this story. So let me do the bad version where I don't give the context, and then you do the full version where you add in the little bits of information that people didn't know, and we'll see if people can understand how that would have impacted your story, right? So Emma gets into the office. It's the first news story that she has to run is normally at 5:30. But for some reason on this morning, whoever had set something up or something had glitched or whatever, the predictor that Emma can see shows that the news is actually going to run, a couple of minutes before it's actually meant to go. And because everything is run down to the minute, she hadn't actually put the file where it needed to be for the news to run. So what she had to do was try and work out, how do I get the file to actually get to the spot that it's needing to be? Because the normal process, we've run out of time. Like, it's not going to load in time. But unfortunately, there was no one around to actually help her do all the technical stuff in the back end to actually fix it. And it was kind of too late. So what she was able to do was to manually go in there and override so that no news played, so that it didn't run the wrong file. And then she was able to get in front of actually fixing it for the next news and making sure that eventually the track was running on time again, so that that problem didn't happen for the rest of the day. Really great story, right? There's problem solving, she's looking at options, and then eventually she just skips that particular time slot of the news. But what didn't we mention, Em?
What we didn't mention is that when I've come in and I've noticed that it's too late to get my current news in there because the log is running early, what that means is if I don't get my current news in, the news from yesterday's file that's automatically sitting there until a new file comes in and replaces it would play. So if I didn't intervene, yesterday's news would play, which is detrimental in the news world when everything is so timely. And it was actually, yesterday was the day that Donald Trump had the assassination attempt on his life. So if people had have heard that again, it would have sounded like Donald Trump was assassinated a second time, which is just, we cannot be putting out misinformation.
It would always be bad any day for the news to be repeated. But in particular, like if it had been a headline about some local thing or whatever, people might have been like, oh yeah, I heard that yesterday. They wouldn't think that it had happened again and they might have gotten away with it. But in particular, this morning at blah, 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 this has happened, and they hear it again and it's like, wow, it's happened again today. The fear and the panic in the community that might present for such a story to be run again, unacceptable.
So in my mind at that time, it was a better decision to skip it and have no news run altogether than to have old news run that could spread misinformation. So suddenly it feels a lot more urgent that I raced in there and skipped it compared to Sarah just saying, yeah, so she ended up skipping it and she could fix it for next time.
She tried to problem solve and she skipped it. Yeah, right? And so the situation, you really need to make sure that you're explaining what happens if there's no file. What's the backup? Is it silence that goes to air for 5 minutes? Well, that would also be really bad because everyone would think their radio's broken and switch stations, right? Like, what are the consequences of that thing? What would have happened? Why was that important? All of that context is what they should be covering in the situation. So now you should have probably a pretty good idea of what's the situation, what should I do, and what's the end result. Now, if you are familiar with some other method like CAR or STAR, it's the same thing. Like, it just really is. We just use different words, but apply your S and your T to the situation, your A to the what I did, and your R to the end result. It's not groundbreaking. We just call them different stuff because we just like to think about it as a story. That's all.
And even if you don't understand the technical parts of their role, the story should make sense and you should be able to tell what skills they've demonstrated. This is important because sometimes the people interviewing them could be a manager or a HR person or someone that doesn't necessarily do the day-to-day sort of tasks. So your stories need to be accessible where anyone could listen to it that's never worked a day in your life, understand what you do and the impact of what you did has.
Yes. And people always think this when they're doing a session with me and speaking to me about something really technical. I've had sessions with people who have all kinds of very, very technical roles, engineering, all kinds of healthcare, like medicine related stuff, all kinds of like scientific research roles, agricultural specific, and they're using words of like, I have no idea what that word is or what that thing is that they're talking about. But it's like, what's a fake word? Make up a word that doesn't mean anything.
Germination.
That's a real word. I mean, a Schlieffen. So let's say they say like, oh, well, I really had to make sure that the Schlieffen was in the right spot because if it doesn't work, then blah, blah, blah. I don't know what the hell that thing is, but it doesn't matter because I understand that it's really important that they had to do it and that they went and found it. Does that kind of make sense? Like, I don't have to know what that thing is or what it does or where it fits or whatever, but I'm still able to follow the story. So that's what we're kind of going for in like genuine overall understanding. The other thing to keep in mind is you don't want them to be giving away the ending too early. Sometimes I see people set up their story and say, oh, and the campaign that we had that got the best results was this one. And it's like, oh, you've kind of ruined it from the very beginning. You don't want to be giving away the ending to start off your whole story. You want that to be like, here's the situation. Here's this big client. It was really important, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, and it was the best one that's got the best results we've ever had. It's going to have much more of an impact that way.
A quick note on things that don't matter. Ums and ahs, don't punish them for this. We're all human. No one's going to sound perfect and scripted. And it's okay if they go a little bit off track and get going again because this happens in interviews. It's natural. And at any time in an interview, you can sort of steer yourself back and say, sorry, I got a bit sidetracked there. Back to what I was saying.
Oh, sorry, where was I? Let me repeat that again. Yeah, totally. Don't matter. And if this is like the biggest interview of their whole life and you're going to be rehearsing over and over and over and over and over, sure, at the very end when you've covered all this other stuff and then they're wanting to make the 1% tweaks, great. Well, then give them some feedback about getting lost and ums and ahs and whatever else you want to do. But do not throw that in when they're still trying to get the hang of like how this all works and making sure that they're telling the story well. The impact and all the other stuff that we've been talking about, way more important than umming and ahhing and getting a little bit lost. They're not hiring someone for how good they are at answering interview questions. They're hiring someone for the skills that they're showing in their interview answers.
Now, things that do matter and that you should give them feedback on, if their stories are sounding too blunt or matter of fact. So we like to put things into stories. We're giving the facts, but we're just making it more engaging and conversational. We don't just want to rattle off blunt sentences. It doesn't have the impact.
And sometimes people like this can be very brief in general. Like they're just not chatty, rambly kind of people. Like they fall into this category of being very to the point. Well, and then it all worked. And it's like, well, what do you mean? Like surely there was a few steps in between there and there. Or they do things like I mentioned before of saying, so I spoke to the person and then the issue was resolved. And it's like, well, what do you mean you spoke to them? Like this sounds like a big complex issue. Like what did you say? Like how did they react? Like they haven't given enough details.
They can leave out a lot of detail.
Yeah, they've kind of glossed over how easy it was for them to do stuff. And what that can sometimes mean is that they're not doing themselves justice because when you get them to break it down, there's all these things that they've factored in and all these parts that they've gone into it and they've just thought, oh, well, they don't need to know that. I've glossed over it. But they're not showing that they have those skills unless they talk about how they actually use them.
Make sure you point out if there are no results to their stories. So they've given you the situation and said what they did, but then they're just kind of ending it there. They need to wrap it up and be talking about why that was important or even why they did what they did.
Yeah. Or what they learned from it, something. The results should be fairly short, but when they get there, they should stop talking. We don't want to hear, oh, and also after that, we did also work out that something. And it's like they're going back into the what I did again. You don't want that. That's where you can really, really spiral into rambling is when you've done the result and then you're going back to clarify stuff. That's a structural issue. And you'll probably find that those details should be slotted into the middle part of the answer instead of tacking them on at the end. You don't need to do a big linking back exercise to how that links back to this role and how you'd use that skill and whatever. It should be a fairly straightforward result, and then that's the end of the answer.
Some things that you can try to be an awesome, incredible help. Give them questions that they might not have specifically prepared for, but you know that one of their stories will work. So maybe you've tweaked the delivery slightly. Maybe you're saying, why have you applied for this role? But we know that that just means the tell me about yourself situation. Or maybe change up the word a little bit because our goal is for them to hear a question and be able to micro adjust or not freak out if the exact question they had in mind wasn't asked.
Yes. And so once they've gone through some of their best bits, they've said to you, ask me these questions, please. And you've done that and you've done a little bit of the foundation. This is taking it to the next level. This is being an incredible, amazing interview prep coach for your friend, partner, sibling, neighbour, whatever. You are able to say, okay, I know some of their stories. And let's use that example that Emma had from before of working under pressure. Let's say you've been practicing that story under the topic of, or under the question of, tell me about a time you worked under pressure. You might throw them a couple of new questions that they haven't specifically heard before and they haven't told you to ask them, but you might go, cool, I'm going to do a few new questions. Here's what we're trying to practice. Explain to them what we're doing. And then you might say to them, I want you to be able to use one of your best bits, your stories that you've already got that we've been working on. And I want you to try and match them on the fly for which question I'm going to ask you. And then you might come out with something like, tell me about a time when you were able to avoid a problem from getting worse. And they'll go, hold on. And then they'll come out with their story, right?
Or showed a sense of initiative. And then I can go, well, I was on my own. There was no other options, and you can tweak it.
Yep. Or when you had to take a drastic action that somebody might not have approved, or like something like that.
You went against protocol.
Yeah, totally. Or tell me a time when you found a mistake that someone else made. Like, you can be really creative with throwing them a question that you think makes sense for the role that they're going for, obviously, but it will specifically match to one or more of their stories. And you want them to be practicing hearing the question, not panicking, taking a moment, thinking about all their stories, working out which one to choose, and then being able to go into delivering it. That is a really, really hard skill to match. And that's like the next level after you've got these stories, after they've been practicing them. How do they then stay calm and match them up?
Especially in the pressure cooker environment where you're a bit nervous, it's good to practice that on the fly, calm, try and adapt.
And they might say, oh, but I don't have an answer for that. And if they go into like making up a new one, that's when you want to pull them up and go, okay, before you make up a new story, you have to be looking at all of your stories you've already prepped and trying to fit one of those in first. If it's last resort and there is literally nothing that matches and it's such a left field question, then yes, you do have to make something up on the fly. But encourage them to come back and think, okay, do you see how this answer probably would have matched that question and that story would have worked? We don't need to think about it matching perfectly to the question. That's not what they're judging you on. This isn't like an exam where you have to have the exact right answer. They're not fishing for a particular story. They're just trying to say, hey, this situation might come up. I'm wanting to get a sense of what skills you've maybe demonstrated in those kinds of scenarios before. Be generous with connecting the dots on what topics would match with what questions.
Epic.
What do you think, Em? Are they ready? It's a crash course training session.
Yeah, I think you've survived your crash course, our little dummies.
Yeah. What else can we say to them? Like, what else do they need to do? You need to hype them up.
Hype them up, build their confidence, pump them up.
When they're practicing their answers, nod and smile at them.
Yes. Be encouraging body language.
Totally. Yeah. And then when you're delivering feedback, like try and be specific as well and say, okay, when you said this bit here, I got a little bit confused. The goal of their answers is not to be perfect. And you can even say, wow, like I really love that example. Another thing that I think people really love, tell them what that answer made you think of them. Does that kind of make sense? Oh, that's such a good story. Like you can go off script and be like out of interview mode for a second before you go into the next question. You can say, wow, that was such a good story. Like I can really see how you were being really strategic then, or like how you had to really think under pressure. And, you know, that bit about the story was showing me that you really also understood how that person was feeling as well. And I really like how that shows this.
Or even share if it made you feel some type of way. Like with my example, tell them if you were like on the edge of your seat of like, oh my God, I'm thinking what's going to happen next? What's she going to do? Like give encouraging feedback if you feel like they're really taking you on the ride where you're imagining being there.
Explain to them what your thought process was when you were hearing that story for the first time, because I think that's what people don't really think about is that how incredible they are. And I promise you, if your friend, partner, etc., neighbor, whatever, is listening to this and doing this prep, then they are already incredible at their job and they're going to have some awesome stories. Be prepared to be impressed, I would say. Like you're going to be so impressed. You know when like you don't know what your friends do for work?
Yes.
And you're like, what even is your job?
You know the TikTok trend where they host PowerPoint nights to explain what everyone does for work?
Yes.
I love that. This listener, interview practice buddy, you will be well equipped at that. If your friend group ever decides to hold a PowerPoint night, you can do it on behalf of this friend because you've just learned all their bits and their achievements.
all their cool stuff. Be curious as well, like get details from them after they've finished their questions and ask little like, oh, is that what happened there? And did you ever find out what happened later? And like be curious because they might go, oh, I didn't realize that wasn't clear. Oh, I should add that to my answer. All of that is going to be helpful. I love this episode. I think this is going to be so helpful.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a good practice buddy.
We've trained a little army of practice buddies, little interview coaches out there helping each other.
They might steal our jobs.
No, they won't. They need us. And plus we're funny, I think, sometimes. Sorry, I mean you're funny.
Thanks.
And there's that sister banter. Thanks for listening to Interview Boss. If you like hearing the sound of our voices, hit that follow button in Apple or Spotify, or better yet, tell someone else about this awesome podcast and all the wonderful things we do to help you. That's how we can hit the charts and we can help even more people. For more advice, inspiration, and to encourage me to make sure I keep posting regularly, please give us a follow on Instagram at InterviewBoss.
We've been your job search besties and helped you in some way. There's a cool way you can support the show. Shout us a virtual coffee.
We get a huge kick out of reading all of your success stories. Head to buymeacoffee.com/interviewboss and shout us a cuppa.
If you keep us caffeinated, we can keep the content coming.